y'all, this is Old Guy with a Wrench coming at you with another video. This is going to be the conclusion to the Suzuki Samurai transfer case rebuild. So follow me over here and let's get her done. This is the rebuild kit that I got from an internet distributor. Let's open it up and check the contents. It looks like everything's here, so let's start putting it all together. Here's an exploded view of the gears, the bearings, and the output shaft. This right here is the shift collar. The side with the lip goes towards the retaining ring. This right here is a large spacer. Your output shaft is going to have two large spacers. The larger edge on each spacer faces away from each other. At the end of the day, this is what your larger gear for your transfer case should look like after complete assembly. Make sure you pack those bearings before you install them. As you can see, this is a smaller gear opposite of the larger gear from the transfer case. As you can see, it's pretty basic. It's got a bearing on each side and the locking nut. This is what the smaller gear looks like, completely reassembled. Make sure you pack the bearings here as well. Here we got the gear that goes in between the input and output shaft. As you can see, it's got two roller bearings and a solid bearing. Make sure you put that solid bearing in between the two roller bearings when installing these parts. As always, make sure you also lube those bearings before you put them in. Alright, let's start putting some seals back in. What I would normally do here is find a socket that's the same diameter as the seal and punch it into the transfer case. As you can see, there's two sides to the seal. The flat side needs to be facing out. So normally what you would do is when you have your transfer case here, you want to be able to see the flat side on the top. Normally just put it in like so. And then put the socket on top. Get yourself a rubber mallet and pop it in. That's it. Once you got your seal seated in there, go ahead and do the same procedure to the rest of the seals, and you should be okay. Alright, what we're looking at here is the drive shift shaft and the reduction shift shaft. Here we got the springs and we got the little bearings. Another spring here. This one goes in the center of your transfer case, which will be this opening here. And this one right here, the drive shift shaft, will go in this location here. Then you want to put the plug on the outside here to keep all this internally intact. You got some concave areas on these shafts, and you want to make sure that you put these bearings according to the way it's illustrated here, or you could try to find a diagram somewhere online where it gives you the illustration of how these bearings and spring go together in sequence to these shafts. Got both shafts, the 3 bearings, and the 2 springs installed into this part of the transfer case. I want to illustrate something over here with the 2 shafts. Let me go ahead and move the camera around. What you want to do is make sure you got these recessed areas facing each other on both of these shafts. If these recessed areas are not facing each other and your driver shift shaft is not taller than your center one, then you're gonna have to start all over to make sure that you get them like that. Don't forget to install this retaining clip into the shorter shaft, down at the base. All right, let's drop some gears in. I went ahead and removed the control arm from the drive shift shaft in order for me to manage these gears and put them in there correctly. I'll go ahead and reinstall this later on. You're going to have this thrust washer right here. You want to make sure that you install it in before you put your center gears in there. It's going to have a hard edge on one side. You want to make sure you put that hard edge down into your transfer case cover. There's going to be a groove on your transfer case. Just sit it in there. You should be fine. Okay, this is the order of installment when I did these gears. I did this one first, the center gear first. Then I put the larger gear in, and then I put the smaller gear in last. Once you get all these gears in, make sure there's movement going in both directions. There's nothing catching. If you feel pretty comfortable that there's nothing that you're concerned about as far as catching or any weird noises, move to the next step. Okay, here we got the other half of the transfer case. We're going to be installing the shim and the thrust washer. Normally what I do here is apply a little bit of grease to keep them a little bit tacky so they can stay in place while I finish my final assembly. Alright, we're ready to slap both of these covers on and move on from there. Once you completed your test fit, make sure both of your surfaces where your gasket goes onto are properly smooth and clean. Here we got another situation where you have your fork that goes to your output shaft, where it's got 2 sides. You got the flat side And you got a side with a lip. The side with the lip faces up as you put it on there. Slide it down. And then you push your pin in. Hopefully my big noggin is not in the way. Let me explain these three sprockets that go onto your transfer case. You're going to have two that are identical. That's these two. You're going to have the single one that doesn't look like the two. The single one goes on the side with the single gear. The two identical ones go on the side with the double gears. Let's put that back on and go from there. Here you got your transfer case sensor switch. Before you go installing this sensor switch, make sure you drop in the large bearing into the opening. Alright, this is the little part I've been waiting for. It came here all the way from India. I'm glad I finally got it. Make sure you lubricate all the O-rings and the gear itself before you put it into the transfer case. Once you slide this last gear into this opening in here, make sure you tighten up the fastener. Here's an exploded view of the shifter assembly. Now we'll go ahead and install the shifter assembly. When you get to this part right here, you want to make sure that you put the flat part down into the opening. Once you got your shifter in place, run through all your gears to make sure that your transfer case is shifting properly. Alright, we're almost at the end of this transfer case rebuild. But before I let you go, there's some indentations on these shafts. All three of them have it. When you install your nut on the shafts, make sure you take a sharp object, kind of like a screwdriver or something along the lines, and you push this into the indentation to secure these nuts. You don't want these coming off later on. I know. That was a long-winded video. But I hope the information helps. When I do put the rebuilt transfer case back to work, I'll be filling her up with an 80-90 weight because the weather here in Colorado isn't really that consistent with hot and cold extremes. But if for some reason you decide to tackle this project, run a gear oil that's best suitable for your area. At the end of the day, I did enjoy working on this project and got the transfer case from this to this with new parts. So on that note, while I think about my next move, like always, keep wrenching.